Sick of buying new rods and reels? Follow every YouTube tip, but you can't seem to catch any more fish? Well, don't worry about it, because I was there with you, following all that crap advice out there. For me, it was Saturday morning TV shows. But after a decade of professionally fishing, writing the book on simplifying your fishing called Catch More Fish, and helping countless other clients out there spend less money to catch more fish, the truth is very simple. You only need one ultralight rod and reel combo. Today I'll show you the perfect ultralight setup, and I'll help you avoid the biggest buying mistakes so you can finally catch more fish without breaking the bank, and this setup will do it for you. So before we get into why this is going to be the greatest combo out there for your ultralight fishing and all your needs, first we need to actually be clear on what we mean by ultralight fishing. And what I don't mean is you're fishing for small fish. Ultralight fishing setups like this one can catch you a ton of very big fish, and do not underestimate how big of a fish you could catch with some pretty small gear. So ultralight basically means you're presenting very, very light lures with very small diameter lines to a more subtle presentation for your fish to trigger more bites, and oftentimes are going to be more finicky bites. As a general guide for ultralight fishing, I'd say ultralight rods are rods capable of throwing your lures 1/64 ounces to 1/16 of an ounce. Anything more than 1/16 of an ounce, I would argue you're venturing outside of that ultralight fishing area. For your reels, you're talking about reels that are meant to have very light line on them, anywhere from 2 to 6 pound test line. Again, I would say anything above 6 pound test line, and you are venturing outside of the ultralight gear area. So for me, in a lot of videos that you see me in, I'm usually throwing 1/64 ounces or 1/32 ounce baits or lures, and I'm never throwing more than 1/16 of an ounce. I'm usually using 2 pound test line. You'll be amazed at how many more fish and how many more bites you could trigger with 2 pound test line versus anything else. The lower diameter line you go, the more the fish are going to bite. So now let's get into the rod, because the rod is absolutely the most important tool in your toolbox, and it's going to literally do mostly everything for you. So this is going to be the most important component of the entire setup. So the rod I use, of course, is the St. Croix Panfish series rod. You'll see this in so many videos of mine. It's 6 foot long. They do make a 6 foot 8 inch rod. It's ultralight powered. That's obviously very important because we're ultralight fishing, and it's got a moderate to moderate slow action. As you can tell right here, you can see that bend right in the middle of that rod right there. That is a moderate action. Now, for those of you that are confused with power and action ratings, very quickly, just so you don't get confused during the video, power just means how much force you have to apply on a rod to get it to bend. As you can see here, this is ultralight, so you don't have to apply a lot of force whatsoever. And then action is just where on the rod it bends. So extra fast action means the tip is only going to bend, but moderate action means it's going to bend all the way down towards the middle of the rod right there. And that is really important when you're talking about ultralight fishing, because you do need that shock absorption with really light hooks, really light gear, really light line. So keep that in mind as we go through and we talk about the perfect rod and reel setup. So why is this rod better than all the competition out there? Well, because it does literally everything I talked about when we just discussed what ultralight fishing means. It's ideal throwing extremely light lures, 1/64 ounces, which is what I love to throw, and it's made of complete graphite for sensitivity, and it's extremely sturdy and powerful for such a light rod. I've been using this for almost 10 years, and this thing is just phenomenal. A lot of the reason why this rod is so versatile for salt and freshwater environments is that the rod is made with a lot of St. Croix's patented technologies that make these rods incredibly light, but with incredibly bend and sensitivity, considering the high quality in carbon that they made this graphite rod out of. Now, I won't go into too much detail about what those technologies mean in this video. It's not a product review video, but I've been using these St. Croix rods for years, and the technologies they put in these rods to make them as good as they are is really quite incredible. I'm a big fan of St. Croix. St. Croix does not know I exist. They don't pay me for this video. They have no idea I'm making the video. I'm just telling this to you because they're such good rods and they've allowed me to catch so many fish, and they can catch you a ton of fish as well. Best of all, they do not break the bank. This rod, for all the things we're about to talk about, will run you about $120, which is not bad for every feature and all these technologies that were put into this rod. So in addition to the incredible technology they put into making the graphite so sensitive and the graphite bend so much, they also have a lot of attention to detail in this rod for sensitivity, which I really love for ultralight fishing. And you can see that right here. You can see the reel here sits right up against the blank of the rod. You can see there's no cork and there's no EVA foam. There's nothing obstructing your feel of the rod when you're holding it right here fishing. Because when the fish bites and you get that bite indication through this super sensitive graphite, you're literally holding the graphite blank right here with the reel right up against the graphite. That is a huge feature of a lot of fishing rods that I look for, and St. Croix does this really, really well, especially in this Panfish series rod. So sensitivity is key when you're ultralight fishing. The other thing I really like about this rod is the length that St. Croix offers for ultralight. You'll hear a bunch of garbage advice out there that you need these really long rods so that you could cast these really light lures, and honestly, that's nonsense. Keep in mind, most people with ultralight setups are fishing from the bank where they have a lot of overhangs and brush and trees. Even on a kayak, you know, you're getting into areas that boats can't get into. So you don't really want a huge long rod, because if you crash into something like a tree with something like a pure graphite ultralight setup, you're gonna break it. So, you know, the 6 foot, and they even make a 6'8" version of this, if you do need a little bit longer of a rod, is really great for maneuvering in really tight spaces, which I really love to do when I ultralight fish. It gives me a lot of versatility for my casting, and since I use such a low diameter line, I could cast this thing a ton when using some really light lures, and I don't need a super long rod. So I would always recommend you keep your rods for ultralight under 7 foot. A lot of garbage advice out there about really long rods. That comes from people that really don't know how to cast and people that are using way too heavy of their line on their reel that's impacting their casting. So this rod's actually rated for 132 ounces to 3/16 ounces, which is perfect. And it does launch a 164 ounce jig or lure or whatever you might be throwing. Perfect. As a matter of fact, mostly I'm using 164 ounces and this rod does the trick. So its rating is absolutely perfect as well. What you really do want to be careful of out there is you'll see some ratings of ultralight rods for rods that actually aren't ultralight. Keep in mind, to make an ultralight setup this good with a lot of bend, with a lot of power, with a lot of sensitivity takes a lot. So just be careful on some of the specs of these rods, and then when you get them, you find out they're actually way heavier than ultralight fishing rods. It's kind of a bummer, especially when you get out there and you can't cast. The other thing this rod does very well and is rated for is 2 to 6 pound test line. That is perfect. That's in the perfect range for ultralight fishing. So the ratings on this rod are on par. The use of the rod is on par. This rod is really phenomenal. All right, and something else you want to avoid from some of that garbage advice out there, and we talked about it, is the bend of the rod. You hear a lot of guys talk about they want extra fast action or fast action rods for ultralight. That is absolute nonsense. You absolutely need some shock absorption in this rod, and you need some bend in the rod when you're casting even light lures to get some distance out on your cast. So when you're setting the hook, especially for big fish, remember, I catch some big fish with this ultralight setup. You do want that shock absorption through the rod. Okay, I'm using 2 pound test line. I use mono, so I'm getting some stretch in that line against the big fish, but this rod is bending and putting a lot of power in that fish. What'll happen is, if you use extra fast action and follow all that nonsense advice out there, is you'll rip hooks out of the fish's mouth. You are talking about ultralight. You're not talking about super aggressive hits. So you'll pull a hook out of the fish's mouth before they really grab a hold of it because of that instant torque, because an extra fast action rod does not bend, right? It only bends in the top of the rod, like we said. And then you can even bust fish off if you're talking about 2 pound test line or 4 pound test line and you hook into something really big. So do not get an extra fast or fast action rod when it comes to this. Now, some of these rods will be rated for fast action. There's no industry standard on this stuff. So, you know, when you get the rod in your hands, give it a bend and see if it bends towards the middle of the rod, just like that. If it bends towards the middle of that rod, you're golden. That's a moderate action rod, and that's what you should be looking for your ultralight fishing. If you try to bend it and it's only bending at the tip, for extra fast action, leave it alone. It's not going to be good for ultralight fishing, and there's so much advice out there telling you to do that. It'll absolutely cost you a ton of fish. Just don't do it. Now let's talk about everybody's favorite subject, and of course that's going to be the fishing reel right here. And what I use is the PC Fun Carbon X2. This is the ultralight version. This is size 1000. This thing weighs 5 ounces. It's amazing. This is the lightest reel in my arsenal, and it just pairs beautifully to any of my setups, including ultralight. Take a look at the balance in that rod and reel setup right there. This is such an incredibly light rod. The combo here makes you feel like you're holding a feather, and that is key for your ultralight fishing, because again, we're talking about sensitivity, 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 and this absolutely does a trick. I mean, look at that. That is an ultralight rod setup. This is 5 ounces. That's incredible. For a 1000 size reel, that's pretty awesome. That's what I'm looking for. Just one piece of what I'm looking for in my ultralight reel setups. Now, some of the, again, crap advice out there is for you to spend $250 on your ultralight fishing reels. And quite frankly, that makes no sense for any inshore fishing application, especially ultralight. This reel right here, I'm just gonna get it out of the way, comes in about 55 bucks. 59 bucks, something like that. And I have a promo code right here that you could use to save yourself an extra 18%. So that'll bring the cost of this down to about 50 bucks, which is an absolute steal considering all the features I'm gonna cover about this very unique, very awesome, very light, perfectly suited ultralight fishing reel right here. So go ahead and use that promo code. I don't get paid for it. I just negotiated that just for you fish lots out there. No commission on my end, just some cost savings on your end. So go ahead and check that one out. Now remember, considering everything is light for ultralight, everything is also given attention to casting distance as well, because you are using ultralight lures. And for a 1000 size reel, PC Fun put a lot of attention into these Carbon X reels. One thing they did was the spool diameter itself is actually wider than a lot of its competitors. So what that does is with a wider spool diameter, there's less friction of the line hitting your reel as you cast. That means you're gonna get a lot further distance with your casts. Now combine the wider spool for extra length in casting with the light, it's 5 ounces. With the light nature of this reel, you're talking about a great combo for ultralight fishing. I would recommend 1000 size for this, for that spool in particular. There's a lot of videos out there with 500 size or 50 size reels out there, depending on the company you buy, but those spools are very narrow. A 1000 size, especially with this light weight, I know I said it before, but it's important, okay, will give you a lot more casting ability and a lot more sensitivity to your setup. So it really allows you to cover a ton of water with your casting distance and your lures to find fish. And that is really one of the most important things you could learn on every fishing outing you go on, is how to locate fish. And that's why ultralight is so great, because with that smaller diameter line and the smaller lures that you're using, you're going to trigger a lot more bites, and you're going to learn just so much more about triggering bites with fish all over your lake, pond, river, wherever you might be fishing. And you could really hone in your skills on finding fish, which is the name of the game. That is the single most important skill that you could have for fishing. And if you're struggling with finding fish, go ahead and check out this tool right here that I built you for free. It's an AI bot fish finder that you could use to find fish anywhere in any body of water that you are. And something else I'll really harp on with ultralight fishing reels, again, a lot of terrible advice out there, but go slow gear ratio reels. Remember, you're fishing slow. This is like a finesse presentation. A lot of times you get these 6-to-1, 7-to-1, 8-to-1 gear ratio reels, and it's kind of ridiculous because a little slightest turn of the handle and you're jumping that lure through the water column, getting 6 6 reels in with 1 turn of the handle. So keep it slow. This is a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel, and that is ideal. That's perfect. That's everything that you need for ultralight fishing. Do not go too fast. You will absolutely cause yourself a lot of lost fish and lost bites with just going too fast. So keep it slow. This reel's great for that. So I did a full reel review on this and how wonderful it is. I fish with this in saltwater environments and freshwater environments. I fish with it everywhere. This entire combo, I fish everywhere. I beat it up, I put it to the test, and it is phenomenal. Take a look at that smoothness. It's like right out of the package. And I've been using this thing with my kids in saltwater, you name it, it's been beaten up in it. And it's just phenomenal. It catches literally everything. And the smoothness and durability of this reel comes from its 10+1 ball bearings that are sealed and shielded, which a lot of companies in this price range for this type of reel just don't invest that extra time and energy and money into this. And that's what makes this so great. And it's what makes it available and very suited for saltwater environments, which again, don't sleep on ultralight for salt water. That would be a huge mistake. So super smooth, super great. They built this with extra heavy gears in here, extra large gears for torque, and they put 3 carbon drag washers in here. 3. No other reel in this range or price point or size really has 3 carbon drag washers in here. And that means this drag on here is just so smooth, which is very, very important for ultralight fishing when you hook into a big fish. Because if the drag isn't smooth, if the drag hangs up on you, you could break off your fish, and that would be awful. A really good use of this kind of combo is to catch bait fish, to work your way up the food chain to catch some really big monsters once you honed in on your bait, which this setup can absolutely do for you. And a shout out to the fan of the channel, Sean Rulins, who sends me these pics of these really large fish he catches with 2-pound test line, including this really big carp right here, which is absolutely great. So if you're not really getting into ultralight fishing, it is just so much fun. You're gonna catch everything with this combo right here. It is my absolute go-to combo, but if you're interested in some additional ultralight gear that will fit even more of your ultralight needs, then check out this video right here where I do a deep dive on some more gear for ultralight fishing. So all right, fish lots, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you out there on the water. Good luck with your ultralight fishing.